It's showing it up on their computers, but it isn't coming up on the screen. So there's been a bit of that, I think, today. So hopefully we can get it resolved for going forward. But thanks.
Thanks, Provost. Chapter 5 is around commissioning of services, and there's a discussion there around what would be local or national commissioning of services. Scotland Excel has provided support in terms of some of the commissioning role over a number of years, for instance, the National Care Home contract. And again, we are supported very much, particularly by the council team in terms of procurement of services. A national move to commissioning, could feel a threat to us locally. We have worked hard to get to a point, and it's some of the areas where a number of the third sector partners wish to be, whereas rather than out for regular commissioning, we treat people as partners. So under the CVO, East Ayrshire Carers, East Ayrshire Advocacy, East Ayrshire CAB, we don't regularly go out and put the services to the market. They're integral to what we do. Whereas in some other systems, you will see that. So what happens is David and Leslie and the team work as enablers to actually deliver what we're trying to do rather than put up barriers to that. And I think there are some challenges to this year if some of that local control is lost. And again, I would maybe defer to David around some of the issues, around procurement and commissioning.
Thank you, David. Anything you wanted to add on that?
Not much compared to what we said before. As I say, we know what we do now. We know there's an appetite to change, and there's always, as I said before, some scope for improvement. Whether or not you move to a national care service, whether or not they have a strategic oversight role or a full operational role, the detail of what any alternatives might look like are lost at the moment, or they're not there. And that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. So it's hard to really say what the future might hold in any kind of detail, because the detail of what that might be isn't there. But the bottom line is that whether or not it goes forward, it's a wee bit like the old shared services model, not a full shared services, but here's where there's room for improved joint working. Well, there's clearly that here, and I don't mean to be facetious. Colleagues look at some of this and see there is merit in some of the actual proposals about how we might work and procure together, but that doesn't need to actually be delivered solely or indeed exclusively through moving to this proposed new model. So there's some good ideas in there that could be further developed, irrespective of whether or not we move to a single national care service. So as with many elements of this, it's about trying to not be entirely negative, identify and recognise where there are some positives, and then it's understanding the connection as to what's deliverable only under this proposed model and what might actually be worth retaining and delivering out with this model or a variation in this model.
Thanks, David. Any other comments from members? Oh, Eric, fair point. If you want to come in, Eric Sutherland.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I think it's just some of the principles that are in here around about ethical and collaborative commissioning need to be based on high quality, effective relationships that are responsive to local needs. Frameworks and national level and national procurement definitely benefit us around about some of those big areas and specialist services as well. But there's a definite tension in here and a risk to being specifically that locally responsive, and squeezing out some of the valued, really well-established local organisations that Eddie was talking about, and just it feels like a real tension and a risk for me around about the balance between national and local here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Members, any comments, questions? John McGee. And
I think Eric's comment there just reinforces, I think, Councillor Cook's previous comments about the balance and where we're going here. And I think they're worth reinforcing. I'd just like to go back to the middle of page 38. I missed that. Consultation documents make little, if any, reference to the issue of the wider workforce. And I think what we're saying there, I think we just need to reinforce that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, we'll make some progress, Eddie.
Thanks, Provost. The areas around market research and analysis, I think that's there. I think we actually do agree that that would be helpful done at a national level. Whether that's done through a National Care Service or Scotland Excels is a different, issue. But actually properly understanding all that, and linking with us, I think we do agree would be something that would be helpful to do that. The next section, section 6, is in relation to regulation. And again, I suppose some of the questions that we get back here is what will change deliveries, in terms of that. There is sometimes in health and care services now a complexity of regulation from national bodies. And if we're going to see, like that, like streamlined in terms of, how we're supported, I think that is helpful. But again, we would want to see how that would be delivered, and again get some more detail around some of that in terms of that being done there. Again, we're back to market oversight functions, etc. And again, that kind of reflects back in the market analysis in terms of doing that. In terms of the powers for regulating the workforce and professional standards, I mean, obviously we have SSSC, as that at this time, and in terms of enhancing the powers of SSSC, again, I suppose that links back to what Marion was saying earlier about understanding the overall role of a National Social Work Agency alongside these other bodies, so that we have clarity. There feels as though there's two different things going on here, within the same paper. And again, if it's okay, Provost, I'll defer to Marion just to talk about, some of the professional roles.
Thank you, Eddie. Marion.
Provost, thanks, Eddie. Again, I think it does come back to clarity around what they're actually seeking to do in relation to regulation. We have got the SSSC. It's fairly well established in terms of regulation of social work and social care staff. They have a very clear system in place around fitness to practice, and they have clear decision making around that. I suppose one of the challenges for us locally is the length of time it takes to investigate instances where we have concerns about the practice of an individual. And if it, anything in relation to improving that would be welcomed. But again, I think more clarity is required in terms of this section as well. So happy to take any questions or points in relation to that.
Thank you, Marion. Members, over to you. Comments or questions? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Provost. It's just a point of clarification, I think. First of all, in the third paragraph of our response, we refer to move from care homes and invested in internal care home provision. Should that be external care home provision? Paragraph. And just in terms of governance, I'm just concerned about where is the governance overall of the National Care Service? Is it done at Scottish Parliament level by ministers? Is that the only level of governance there will be?
Which paragraph was it that you picked up on, Tom? Sorry.
Under Chapter 6, paragraph 3 down, the very last line of it, internal care home provision that refers to. I think that should be external.
No, I think it should be internal, should it not?
There's an act missing. It's internal care at home provision.
Oh, right. I knew it didn't read quite right.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, any other comments or questions from members? Okay, move on. Eddie.
Thanks, Provost. And if we go on now, we're into fair work and valuing the workforce. This is important, and it does reflect, some of the conversations we've had earlier to make sure that right across the whole social care workforce that they are valued. I suppose one of the issues that we need to make sure is that in doing that, it is not a race to the bottom in terms of that. clearly, you know, this council in, you know, the past year or so has looked at and re-evaluated the value of our social care workforce, and, you know, it moved them from a grade 3 to grade 5 in terms of that. You know, these are local people, mainly local women. You know, they invest in pensions here, you know, they spend their money here, and, you know, like, so we clearly think that there is a real, you know, need for surety around, you know, how we can do that. I suppose the other thing is about the one size, you know, that fits all, and to an extent, this is not the biggest, you know, concern, you know, like for us, but, you know, like how the rate of pay for people in East Ayrshire to actually be sustainable sometimes can be different from the centre of Edinburgh. So I was speaking to my colleagues in the centre of Edinburgh, they likely couldn't recruit social care staff at the rates that we get them. So actually national, you know, like payments, and it's why you end up with London allowances and all these different, you know, like things there. So there are issues around that, but the issues around training, decent pay, decent rights, I think, you know, in terms of our response at a national level, that's the type of thing that, you know, that is useful for a national care service to do. And I don't think we should, you know, be negative about that for the sake of that there are real opportunities there. And it's one of the things that, you know, like, so if we were going to be equitable across the health service and the care service, at that stage, national government directly would be responsible for funding, you know, like that into the national care service, instead of, as we know just now, the difficult position that we are in as local government are sitting almost as a buffer between that, where we get a certain amount of funding to us, and it's not enough to meet the aspirations of our social care workforce when they compare themselves to the other, you know, part of the health and social care partnership in terms of the health workforce, and there's a divergence there. So on the whole, you know, I think that the you know, issues around there, and there are many unknown issues clearly around there, but fair work and value in the workforce is a positive area, as is workforce planning a positive area, and they do follow on straight from the Feely report.
Thank you. Councillor John McGee.
I think this bit is fairly well covered, as Eddie's pointed out, but I still think we could deal with this without a national care service. I mean, fair work's not just about wages, although the wages are very important, but it's about giving folk the opportunity whether to train, whether to advance their career. We've talked about it in this council about making a career in care, and I think that could be done with the support of the government, but not necessarily having to go to a national care service to do that. You don't need to go to a national care service to pay folk fairly, to make sure they've got the right training, to give them the opportunity to move up the scales and advance their career. So, I mean, I think this part's covered fairly well, but I still think we need to reinforce that, aye, we agree with all that, that's very positive, but we could do that without going to a national care service as described.
Thank you. Eddie?
I think that's absolutely right, and it's back to, if we go to a national care service, it's not a national care service about delegating responsibility of our services to it, that there's a support role that a national care service could provide around all sorts of stuff without actually our services losing that local accountability and control. You know, I think that's what we're saying. We're not saying that, you know, you would delegate your services to get this. You could do this and keep your services local.
Thank you. Any other comments, members? Okay, Eddie.
We've already, you know, touched on this. You know, again, you know, like the training and development would be part of that overall, you know, like workforce offer for that. But again, reflecting back, how does that link to, you know, the current agencies that are there, and how does it link to the new, you know, social work, the National Social Work Agency? There's also an issue about personal assistance, you know, so just now making sure that personal assistants are, you know, through self-directed supports, how are they regulated? And, you know, we've got, again, comments in there about the need clearly to make sure that people are safe but particularly in some very rural areas, because to start with, you know, you weren't allowed to employ family members in terms of self-directed support, but in some very rural areas there was actually nobody else to employ, and so people did do that. So they're a bit about, you know, making sure any way we go down there takes account of learning that we did when self-directed support come in. And again, I suppose one of the reflections there was that's already within the self-directed support, you know, legislation that's around. So that's the last section of the report.
Thank you, Eddie. Members, we've had quite a long discussion today on this paper. Are there any sort of final comments? And we can then move to the recommendations. Any comments? First of all, get Councillor Cook, Councillor Jim Todd, Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Provost. It's covering, you know, the points that have been made. You know, there are some good things within the proposal for the National Care Service about standards and about training and wages. But as Eddie has said, I don't think we need to go down the route of getting rid of everything else simply to do that. It can be done as a standalone. So, I mean, I think we have to make it very clear in the response that, you know, there's good bits in it, but as it stands just now, we couldn't support the whole situation. There's certainly not enough information there for us to be able to make a proper judgment on it. But as it stands, I don't think we can say this is good. I don't think we should be saying that we accept it. We would have to mention the risks that are inherent in there and make that quite clear that we would be better, and the government would be better trying to promote IGBs through the councils who are not doing it properly, and put the money back into the IGBs who are doing the job properly, and let us continue as we are just now, and providing a really good service for the people that actually want it at a very minimal cost. So I think that's going to be part of the overall summary that we put in.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Jim Todd.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I agree with a little what Tom was saying there. It almost seems to be that we're victims of our own success, because through the years we took on the challenges of health and social care partnership, and we put a lot of time and effort and resources into that. And that was everyone, every councillor and all the officers. And it came out, and I believe has been the best in Scotland. But unfortunately, there will be councils that it's not working properly. And I think it's human nature that some people don't look at the successes that East Ayrshire was, but they look at the failures. And they were, I think, with all the good intentions of trying to bring councils up, maybe to our level, unconsciously. I think we need to stipulate in our response how well we do things here. And I think that we could tick every single box in the consultation paper and we'll get 10 out of 10. As other councils have said, that there are some good points in the paper and they're to be welcomed. But I think our response to the Scottish Government is we already do these things, we do them well. And I think it's really important that we are allowed to continue to do them, because we trust the officers, we trust the workers. I would really emphasise the part about the training that we've introduced for our staff, for our care staff. It's the care profession, I always call it. It's not an industry, it's a care profession. And I'm delighted all the work that's went in to get our guys and lasses up to that level that they want to be. And we encourage them to get trained to be all the best they can be in that profession. And I would supplement the response with an application to give us more support to get more training, get more folk into the profession. But great discussion today. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the response. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Reid, Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Prof. It was a really good discussion about this today, and I don't want to go over some of the points I made, but I have to just in summation. I think others have said, there's merits in this approach. Decent, fair pay, training, market research, and a national consistent approach. Understand where the government's coming from with that, and that was part of the manifesto that was presented in terms of national care strategy. But I think two things I really want to emphasise here. I think the government does recognise East Ayrshire as an exemplar authority, and I think this response that this council make, beyond, I'm just saying that's, I think amongst the 32 authorities, is one response that will listen to, and I think we've got to get it absolutely right. I think Eddie's words, we're fixing a problem we don't have. I think that's absolutely legitimate, and I think what we've got to say is, when we're evidencing our points, we've got to be absolutely give clear evidence and hold no punches, and just see where there's contradictions and where the service isn't going to work in terms of, whether that's community empowerment in localities that goes completely against the grain in that. Big issues in terms of some of the capital, the buildings, VAT, big financial things that Joe mentioned, and also the stakeholders themselves. Some of the people that are delivering, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the third sector, and the people receiving the service. I don't see in many instances down there how this service is going to get improved at all, and there's a risk to the service that's getting delivered. And I think we should make that absolutely crystal clear. I think that's all I want to say just now. But I think it's how this is going to be an important. I think it's great that we've taken an hour and 3 hours and 24 minutes, probably a wee bit more. But I think this is really important how we respond here.
Thank you, Dougie. Councillor Robertson, Councillor Grant.
Thanks very much, Provost. Yeah, it has been a good discussion, a lot of good points made, especially extolling the virtues very much of what we do well here in East Ayrshire. But just looking at the recommendations, recommendation 4 on page 3, we're agreeing to receive the final response on the 28th October 21 prior to submission to the Scottish Government by the deadline of 2nd November. Now, if I'm reading this right, you're going to submit as part of the consultation process and get a response back by the 28th October. So this will go to a further meeting of Council, and hopefully some of the information gaps will be filled in to allow us to further deliberate on matters. My reading of that be correct, Provost?
No, I don't think so. I think what would happen is that following today's meeting, officers will go away, and I think it's fair to say strengthen the response and perhaps add, I think it's cross-party today, the views of members has been to strengthen that response. That will then come back to Council for ratification before it goes to Scottish Government. So we're not going to get further information from the Scottish Government between now and then. Eddie, if there's anything else you wanted to add on that, but I think that probably covers it.
No, that's absolutely right. We'll get no further information at this time.
Hope that helps. Councillor Roberts.
That does. Thanks for that, Provost. I was just wondering about the tight time scales. It didn't leave a lot of time, but thanks for clarifying that.
No problem. Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. It has been a very interesting discussion, and it's been a pleasure to see all of us working together in a common cause for something that we all believe in. I think it's fair to say that as a result of this meeting, there's a general conclusion that the policy of one size fits all doesn't really work in this instance. It's not the way that we've found would satisfy the needs of the people of East Ayrshire. So I would just add in conclusion that I would really hope that from this meeting we take forward the will of this council, which from what I've heard today is that we approve of some good ideas and some areas where we can see the benefit to the public and to our staff. But in general terms, we want to continue to hold our own council and to be able to run things successfully in the unique and successful way we have done up till now. So that's my recommendation, that we make it quite clear that this is the direction we want to travel in.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor John McGee, and then we'll move to the recommendations.
Thanks, Provost. Like I said at the beginning, do against developing national standards of care. But I think we've got to get our language right. As I said earlier, Eddie's using the word challenging, and I'm using the phrase potentially disastrous. I'm not saying that my version is right, but I think we need to be wording this very strongly and in the right way, as Councillor Reid has said earlier. But to quote some of the officers, Ken, for developing a national standard of care, it must be based on a fair, long-term and sustainable funding solution linked to a long-term plan that understands social care, investing in prevention, early intervention, resilience, well-being and inclusion. That's something that's been drummed into elected members in this council for years. And the phrase driven by local lived experience, that's important, very important. And we can't have the one-size-fits-all approach. And I say again, centralising accountability with ministers includes dismantling the IJBs. Ken, they're dead, they don't exist anymore. And the creation of these new boards, and I'm just quoting here, which could result in some fundamental and unintended consequences. The dismantling of the IJBs, as I've already said, is in fact seen by many other folk as already a step in the path to dismantling local government. And I think that's an issue. Well, we can't presume too much regarding education, etc. I think it's something that we need to raise. I've got to say, I think this is a very detailed paper, and I've got to commend this council for having the seminar prior to this. So we have discussed this at great length and had great input for the officers, for the folk that I would say was at the coal face. But I think the issues of that, I mean, surely we must ken that before you go, oh, so we've made a mistake, it's costing us another £125 million. That £660 million looks less and less all the time. So that must be made clear. The issue of our workforce and the legal or statutory position of one new body, that must be, again, made very clear. The question of who is the provider of the last resort, surely that's a question that's got to be answered, because the Friday after it's all imposed on us and somebody phones up and says, we can't meet the people's needs, we can't provide that service. Who deals with that? We've got to ken all that stuff. And just to say, I think we should be clearly stating that whilst we fully support an improved national standard of care, we don't agree with the new National Care Service for Scotland based on the information we have before us today, because there are just so many unknowns that it isn't really meaningful consultation. And I think we should be saying that in our response.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGee. Members, I'm going to move to the recommendations. I think we've had a very good and healthy debate, and the fact on one item alone we've been 3.5 hours, I think shows that we recognise how important it is for the people of East Ayrshire, and actually how fundamental these changes can have an impact on the services that we currently provide, but also wider impact on local government and the future of that. So without any further ado, we'll move to the recommendations at page 3 of your papers. It's paragraph 2. You'll note there are 5 recommendations there. Our members agreed, and we will remit this to officers to strengthen this response, bring it back to Council on the 28th of October to allow it to be then submitted to the Scottish Government on the 2nd of November. Is that agreed, members? Oh, Councillor McGee.
I would certainly agree that, but I wouldn't like to be coming back to another council meeting and we're all sitting here finding out that it's not strong enough. I don't know how you overcome that.
Eddie, perhaps you can.
I think, like we over the next week, need to work hard. I mean, it is only a fortnight away, so that by the time the papers, come out to you, next week for the 28th, actually you've got that opportunity to read them early, to give us comments. So by the time we come to the 28th, we're actually sitting with your comments in front of us, because it'd be really hard on the 28th to actually sit and do all that and change it again and make sure you were okay. So if by then we know your comments, so we need to make sure we get your papers out, you know, on the 21st, 22nd, you know, like, so you've got well the weekend to read it. Give the feedback on the Monday, just a wee email to us. We can then make sure by the time we're sitting there on the Thursday, any necessary changes, when we're sitting with the paper, we can just sit and work our way through it and saying there's a proposed change, that one, in terms of doing that. Likely by that time, Craig, we would be able to also include any comments that we'd had for the IJB.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So we'll have a similar session to this at next week's IJB, just to try and tease out any, not so much all the issues, because I think the issues here will probably be very relevant. It's probably to tease out anywhere where we think there might be something slightly different from an IJB perspective. So if there is a slight difference of opinion, we can reflect that in the response as well. But that was certainly the intention that we do that at next week's IJB, which is on Wednesday afternoon. So yeah, I would agree, Eddie, by the time we come to having that final discussion, we should have the IJB feedback as well.
Thank you. I think certainly it's been very clear from members that there is a desire to strengthen that response. Councillor Reid, and then I'll bring in Councillor Cook, and then we are going to move to recommendations.
Thanks, Provost. No, I think it would be beneficial if we can all sign up to this. I think the strength of feeling, and you know, as I said earlier, I think we as an authority are pretty important. You know, in terms of I think we're one of the best at delivering integrated health and social care. I think it's important that we try and get something that we can agree and sign up to, and that's, we'll leave that in the capable hands of Eddie and maybe negotiations throughout the week. It has to be strong, and I think we've got to get the tactics right as well. There's a job to be done there.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, absolutely no problem with the recommendations at all, but just picking up on the point about the 28th, I think Eddie has kind of gone down the road of what I was going to suggest, but that was that you try and, you know, the three leaders perhaps get an early sight of what's being proposed so that we can have, you know, try and avoid any lengthy discussion on the 28th about the actual wording. So, you know, if Eddie's trying to get everybody with the papers, that's probably even better. But, you know, if that can't happen, then I think if we can even talk to the three leaders just to make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page. I mean, I think we've all got the same ambition on this. We're all feeling the same way, but we just need to make sure that we get the wording right.
Thank you, Tom. I think we need to make sure all members are cited. So, you know, with a week, if we can, the week before, get that paper out 7 days before. That allows the groups to meet, the independents to meet with each other as well, and strengthen if we feel it needs further strengthen. But I think officers will be in no doubt that the mood of the council is to send a very strong and clear message. Members, the recommendations are before you. There's 5 of them at paragraph 2 of page 3. Your papers, are they agreed? Agreed. Okay. Thank you all very much. It's been a good debate today, and I look forward to seeing you all on the 28th, if not before. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Robert.